Welcome to the Bold Money Revolution podcast. This is your source for straight talking, no fluff, business and high performance conversations that add real depth and value to the way bold leaders live, work, and thrive. I'm your host, Tara Newman. I'm here to show you how to optimize your performance as a leader so that you can grow a business that is profit-rich, efficient, and allows you to generate real, tangible wealth for yourself and others. We are here to help you lead with your values, to perform without overwhelm and burnout, and to do your most important work in the world. Hey there, bold leader. It's Tara Newman, and I have a question for you. What's possible for you if you knew the exact revenue goal to set in your business instead of plucking a number out of thin air? The toughest part of setting a revenue goal is knowing where to start. It's normal to be confused about this goal. After all, how many of us actually got a finance degree at the same time as starting a business? Probably none of us, like a big goose egg. And if you weren't taught how to do something, and then you combine that with the internet marketing world telling you what you should want for your business, well, it can start to feel like a game of Monopoly. Instead of having a revenue goal, you operate on luck, a roll of the dice, and simply hope you bring in enough, which would explain why 83% of small business owners are living paycheck to paycheck. From my experience working with small business owners just like you, setting a revenue goal is so difficult that most avoid it completely. It would also explain why business owners feel like they are working way too hard for what they actually take home. I know from my personal experience, I would sometimes get to the end of the month and not have any money left over to pay myself or even give myself a raise. Now, this free calculator is simple and easy to use. Here's what Alexis had to say about it. Alexis said it was helpful to compare my current reality and needs with my dream needs and to see concrete numbers laid out in front of me. Seeing the numbers in front of me made my goal seem more attainable and not so overwhelming. So in order for you to get this revenue goal calculator in your hands, I want you to head on over to theboldleadershiprevolution.com/revenue and grab your revenue calculator today. Hey, bold leaders. Today, I'm starting us off with a question. Why should you stay calm even though the news is scary? The economy seems to be on the brink, and we're all tired of the uncertainty. It's Tara Newman, and this is the Bold Money Revolution podcast. And I'm excited to be here with you today, sharing why I'm not worried about the economy and why I think you might want to consider not worrying either. I want to welcome new listeners and a hearty welcome back to the very dedicated community of small business owners who tune in here each week. We really value your time and your attention and your reviews and your shares of this podcast. If you are new to this podcast, I am a business growth strategist for small business owners, and my vision is to make running a small business feel like play and to support you in down-regulating your nervous system when it comes to making money. I'm here to help you navigate and normalize what business ownership actually means, not the bullshit you see on the internet or in the latest Hulu documentary on Tech Bros Gone Wild. I eschew startup culture, online business culture, and any hustle grind culture that glorifies hyper-aggressive growth at all costs. I am an expert in organizational psychology, the profit-first methodology, and I am a huge money and economics nerd. But I always say I am not an economist, right? And this episode is kind of like a recalibration. I think we need to just take a breath, take a beat, recalibrate, check in. It's a prerequisite for future episodes because we may be talking about things that you find activating. We will be talking about the realities of being a small business owner in our current economic climate. And I know there are a number of things that I talk about on this podcast that some of you find super activating. In an episode a couple of episodes ago, I was interviewing a client of mine, Michelle Tubman, and I said, sometimes people on the podcast message me and they say, I love when you talk about money. I love when you say, I love money. And Michelle's like, oh, I don't like when you do that. That makes me, she's like, that doesn't feel good to me, right? So I completely understand that talking about money, that talking about sales and selling, talking about the economy might rile some folks. So I really want to come in here and share my perspective because I am 100% grounded around this topic. And the one thing that I know for myself is that when I am looking to learn things, when I am consuming important conversations or information about things that I find activating, it is always really helpful for me to listen to somebody who is very grounded on the topic. And so I really want to share with you why I'm grounded, why the heck I'm so calm. And I want to start off with what's good in the economy right now. What's actually positive? Because it's very easy to read these news headlines that are really hyperbolic and get ourselves all worked up. As a matter of fact, the other day I was reading an article, not about the economy, it was about something else. And the title was like, really, I was like, wow. I clicked on it, clickbait. I clicked on it. And then in the article itself, it refuted the actual title of the article. And I was like, wow, I think we've devolved to like a whole new level of hell here. And it didn't feel like news. It felt like, I'm going to say content. Like, I think there's a difference between content, maybe, just thinking out loud here, and news. Like, I can see you want somebody to read your content, so you put a title on it that's like super flashy and clickable, but I'm not sure that's how we should be. That's how I don't think that's the path journalism should be taking. But that is just my personal opinion. Agree, don't agree, totally up to you. But I am very present to the headlines that are out there and how that's impacting us as business owners and what we think and what we see. So I just want to take a second and focus on some of the good things that I've seen. I don't read typical news outlets when I'm reading about money and the economy. So just so you know where I get my information from, I read a lot of McKinsey's output and their content and their research. I read a lot of research from Deloitte and Touche. I read Barron's, Kiplinger's, CNBC sometimes, but again, I'm and I'm also following influencers, which seems weird in the economic space that there are economic influencers. That just feels strange, but there are. And there's a pretty good podcast called Ones and Twos by Adam Tooze, Tooze. NerdWallet puts out a great podcast, and there are definitely some other ones that I feel have a real grounded and fair and balanced approach to talking about what is happening in the news around money and the economy. So that being said, there was a McKinsey article that came across my feed, Global Economics Intelligence Executive Summary for April 2022. It was published on May 9th, and the quote here is, amidst high inflation and the continuing war in the Ukraine, strong demand persists. Forecasting institutions trim growth estimates. So strong demand persists. That's good, right? And growth is still there. They've just trimmed the estimates. Now, what is happening in our global economy is incredibly complex and complicated right now. There are so many different facets that are impacting our global economy. And that's why I don't want to get into the weeds of those things. I want to just simply acknowledge that this is a beast. this is a beast of a topic right now. There was an article from Deloitte and Touche, State of the U.S. Consumer, May 2022. And it has a title here, a subtitle, Short-Term Signals Flash Concern, Long-Term Optimism Still Intact. And I think that's also really good. It goes on to say, more Americans cite concerns about making upcoming payments, savings, and credit card debt. As I would expect, that would be normal right now. And we're going to talk about this more in other episodes. But they go on to say, but optimism that personal financial situations will improve within the next 3 years holds steady. And this is really what I've been saying to business owners is now's the time. Business owners are famous for putting their head down and focusing on today. That's why we see a lot of marketing messages around get clients now, right? This frenzy around now, today, the short term. And that is not going to work in the next, from now until probably the next 2 years. I want everybody to kind of like pull their heads up, pull their gaze up, look at the horizon, and start to build for what you want 3 years from now. If you continue to operate from the day to day, you are going to continue to get what you have today. But if you set your sights a little longer out toward the horizon, zoom out, when in doubt, zoom out. And I want you to build for that longer term. That has been one of the main contributing factors to the success of my business over the last 8 years is I don't engage in short-term tactics. I am always building for the longer term, long-term revenue growth, not short-term cash. Now, sometimes we absolutely do need short-term cash, but I find that if you build and you create a skill set around long-term revenue, you don't have to worry as much about short-term cash. So stop focusing on the day-to-day, lift your eyes up, check out the horizon. Let's start focusing 3 years ahead. And they did have a graph in this article that I thought was really interesting. And the graph was titled, Consumer Spending Grew 0.2% in March, driven by a rise in services spending, which is now above pandemic levels. And why this grabbed my attention is because I am a service-based business and I work with service-based businesses. And so services, the spending on services, not necessarily goods, is increasing. And when I look at, and I'm going to say, hey, check in with where you're spending your money, both in your business and in your personal life. Like when I look at that for myself, it's predominantly services. And I've mentioned these services on this podcast before and, you know, how I see that as a part of my role in creating a small business economy. And so that really piqued my interest and I felt really optimistic about that. A couple other good things is we have more data today than ever before, which I get can be a bad thing, but I'm going to choose to see that as a good thing. There's an awareness. There's a level of understanding. Sure, there's a lot to sift through, as I was saying. Yeah, everybody's got an opinion that can be unhelpful at times, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the data collection. And I'm noticing for myself, and while I'm out and about, or oot and a boot, if you are a Canadian friend of mine, I have a lot of Canadians in my audience. Hey, to my northern neighbors, pre-pandemic behavior is starting to come back where I'm starting to see more people in stores and going to restaurants. And I think I am feeling a little pre-pandemic-y, which is really feeling good. It's giving me a little bit of an exhale with that. So I think that's also a really good thing. So here's why I'm calm. Personally, this is me. I'm a history buff and I'm a money nerd. And when I combine those things, I do a lot of deep diving into the history of money, into the Great Depression, into various panics that we've seen in our economy over the last 100 years, recessions, stagflation. And I have five key takeaways from all of this reading and studying that I do. And I want to share them with you. You can take them for what they are, but these are my key takeaways. So key takeaway 1, this too shall pass. I used to hate when my mom said that to me as a kid, but it is true. This too shall pass. 2, humans are remarkably resilient and innovative in the face of adversity. I am obsessed right now with reading personal accounts from the Great Depression. And people are like, oh, that's depressing. And I'm like, actually, it's not. It's not depressing. It's really inspiring. One of my favorite books, not from this time, from a different time in history, is Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning, about his time, Viktor Frankl's time in various concentration camps, actually, during the Holocaust. And as a Jewish woman, reading about the Holocaust has always been really difficult for me, as having ancestors and relatives that perished during that time in various concentration camps. And I had really avoided it until I picked up this book and I was like, wow, this is really inspiring. And I go back and read his words when I'm in a place of darkness. And I find that to be really uplifting. So if you haven't checked out that book, you might want to. And really that belief that humans are really remarkably resistant and innovative. 3, shaking things up creates change, and it creates opportunities for people. 1, who probably might not have had an opportunity before. And for people who are willing to lean into discomfort and uncertainty. And I think that's good. I think that's a good thing. There was a lot of social programs that came out of the Great Depression. There have been a lot of policies and changes that have come out of various financial crises in our country, and some have changed things for the better. And that is what I'm choosing to focus on, is how can this disruption right now change things for the better and create opportunities for people who might not have had them before, and for those who are willing to lean into discomfort. 4, the government has a pattern of experiencing a crisis and trying to improve the system. Okay, regardless of what you think about the government and regardless of what you think about their trying, they do try. And I think that some of the measures that they have put in place over the last almost 100 years, certainly since the Great Depression, have been helpful, and it has helped mitigate some of what's happened in the past. You know, in 1987, when the stock market crashed due to a systems technology failure, they put safeguards in place to make sure that hasn't happened again. And it hasn't happened again, right? So I do think that we have guardrails and protections that will hold in the face of real uncertainty. And I think we're going to find our weak points. And I think we're going to build different safeguards now. And that's okay. This is just a cycle of development. And 5, the last one, listen, I think Americans have an obsession with comfort, and it's a detriment to progress on all fronts. I think we are more willing to fight for our comfort than we are to fight for the greater good, just a personal opinion. And I think that it's a detriment to our personal, professional lives, policies, our finances. And so I see discomfort as a good thing. It's real, it's humbling, it's catalyzing, and I'm excited to see what innovation gets inspired when people are uncomfortable. Aside from that, we have no control over the actions of the world. I only can control my own actions. I can only control how I show up in the face of new information, in the face of things that I can't control. And here's what I really want you to hear, and you might need to borrow this belief. I trust myself to act accordingly, figure it out, and make the best decisions for me. I'm going to say it again because I know so many women struggle to trust themselves for one reason or another. I trust myself to act accordingly, figure it out, and make the best decisions for me. Go write that down in your journal and go write that into existence. Go breathe that into existence for yourself. Now, when I say, I just want to touch base one more thing on the things that we don't have control over. Let me give you a list. I can't remember if this was from the Deloitte article I read or the McKinsey article that I read, but it is basically a list of potential risks to economic growth in the next 12 months. And I'm going to read them in order of highest risk to lowest risk. Geopolitical instability and/or conflict. Volatile energy prices, inflation, rising interest rates, change in trade policy and/or relationships, trade conflicts, increased economic volatility, the COVID-19 pandemic, financial market volatility, and asset bubbles. I really can't control those things, right? And I just wanted to read those out for you so you can see what I'm talking about. There's very little that I can do to influence the largest risk factor, which is geopolitical instability, or the second risk factor, which is volatile energy prices, right? The only thing I can do is when energy prices go up and my energy costs go up, to think about how I want to be in relationship to those costs. Okay? That's it. So let me continue on with some of my beliefs that you might want to consider borrowing. I would not be where I am today if I hadn't borrowed the beliefs of my mentors, of people that I admire, of business owners who are out there sharing and talking publicly on podcasts like I am here. Because when I hear them say things, it challenges me to check in and say, wow, if this is here for them, this could be here for me. What would be possible if I chose to believe this? And so I want you to borrow these beliefs. The other thing is humans have a really terrible time at visualizing what else is possible. So we tend to get very myopic and stuck in what's happening here for us now, today, and not thinking about who we could possibly become. And then how do we take responsibility for that being, that person we want to become? And so here are my beliefs. I am deadly confident that I will always make the money I need to provide for my family. Because 365 days a year, I am building my money-making skills. I am educating myself. I am learning. I am testing. I am failing. Because the only way to learn is to fail. I am failing. I am making money imperfectly. I'm growing my wealth imperfectly. And I am figuring things out. I am in it every day, 365. This was the lesson that I took away from our first business and the failure that was our first business, because we were really great at delivering. We were really great at meeting customer expectations. We would sacrifice ourselves for our customers, but we paid very little attention to the actual selling of the things that we needed to deliver. That was a weakness for us. That was an opportunity for us to do better. And so that's why that is so important to me. I'm also not too proud to do what needs to be done. You know, when our first business went bust and we decided to close it, my husband threw his tools in the back of his, he actually bought a trailer to attach to his pickup. And he went around to everybody we knew and was like, who needs handyman stuff done on their house? I'm here. I'm looking to earn money. What do you need done? And he would take the small jobs, the crappy jobs, because nobody else wanted to take those. And, you know, contractors only wanted the big jobs. And he just needed money to pay the bills, right? And so he would take whatever came his way so that we had money coming in, so we could put food on the table, so we could pay the mortgage and buy us some time while we figured out what's next. So I'm not too proud. There are a lot of things that I do in my business that most people outsource, that they would outsource, but I do them. Here's the other thing. I have boundaries. I have boundaries around my money. I have boundaries around my business. I have boundaries around the content I consume, what I share. I don't speculate. I don't speculate in my business, meaning I don't jump onto the next fad because someone has said somewhere in a marketing message that this is the next big thing. You will very rarely ever see me, if at all, jumping onto a fad. I do the fundamentals, the basics. I always say I'm a basic B. I do the fundamentals. I do what works. That's it. I don't speculate in my finances. I don't speculate in my investments. I have personal goals that have meaning to me. I have my Thrive list, which is a boundary. I don't believe in the hype, and I also don't believe in the doomsday predictions. I've learned that memories and love are things that money can't always buy, right? I can create memories and traditions with my family, and it costs nothing. I can create experiences that don't cost anything. I can love up on the people in my life who are important to me, and it won't cost me anything. So there is always opportunities for me to get what I need because I have these boundaries. I also have a clear plan. I debrief weekly, and I'm not rigid. I am flexible and agile. I will happily take on a beginner's mindset to admit that I was wrong and to adapt my goals and desires. And here's the other thing. I plan for the worst. I expect the best, and the best often happens. I'm convinced because I've planned for the worst. I will allow myself to go down worst case scenarios and look at my darkest fears because it helps me feel prepared. It helps me see that sometimes some of the fears that I do have are really silly and I don't need to worry about them. When I bypass this stuff, it keeps coming back. It gets perseverative. But when I address it, it can go away. And so I plan for the worst and expect the best. I can both wonder about the possibilities and stay grounded in the realities of the here and now. In a world that only wants you to dream big, be unrealistic with your goals because you can, or mindset or manifestation, it's important also to stay in the present and own what is in front of you. Here's another belief. Time does not exist for me. Everything I want, I will have. A longer time horizon is my very best friend. I don't need things to happen now. I can be patient. I can wait because every day there is evidence that I'm right on track. There is evidence because I am relentless about finding the evidence. I am relentless about finding my wins. I have zero expectations that my life will be perfect. It hasn't been since the day I was born. These beliefs allow me to thrive in any environment. Do I prefer an environment of peace and prosperity? Of course. Who wouldn't? Who doesn't? Can I thrive through a zombie apocalypse? 100% for sure. I am certain of that. And I believe the same for you. I believe the same for you. So I'm going to leave you with some questions for you to consider at the end of this episode. What resonated with you from this episode? Is there a belief that I have that you would like to borrow? Pick one belief or mantra and journal on it. If you've been too scared to plan for the worst and avoid reality, get curious. Ask yourself, what would it look like for me to plan for the worst? How would that feel? What could make it easier or more enjoyable to plan for the worst? Instead of saying, I can't, ask yourself, what can I do? How can I think differently about this? Until next time, folks, take care. If you've found this podcast valuable, help us develop more bold leaders in the world by sharing this episode with your friends, colleagues, and other bold leaders. Also, if you haven't done so already, please leave a review. I consider reviews like podcast currency, and it's the one thing you can do to help us out here at the Bold Leadership Revolution HQ. We would be so grateful for it. Special thanks goes to Stacey Harris from Uncommonly More, who is the producer and editor of this podcast. Go check them out for all your digital marketing and content creation needs. Be sure to tune into the next episode to help you embrace your ambition and leave the grind behind.